Hello, welcome to this podcast by the African Catalyst called Making Infrastructure Happen. I'm here with Nimo Joe Madugo, a partner at Kenna LP. You're welcome, Nimo.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. All right, so in this episode, we will be going straight into the issues. The title of this episode is the legal groundwork that needs to be laid out when developing large-scale infrastructure projects. And one thing we know is that during the early stage of an infrastructure project, there are often been so many activities happening. And sometimes as a project developer, you often forget exactly why you're doing the project. Most times when developing an infrastructure project, the idea comes to you first. And when the idea comes to you, you definitely don't even know what you want to do. Most times you'll say, oh, I need funding, I need money. But we've seen time and time again whereby the projects are not started with the right level of groundwork that needs to be done. So just giving you an opening statement here is that what do you think are the real key issues an infrastructure developer should deal with at the very early stage?
Okay. Thank you again very much for having me. I think one of the key issues that people tend to ignore, and I'm not saying this as a pitch, I'm saying it because of the reality of the situation, we find out that so many times when it comes to infrastructure projects or to several other projects, people tend to bring in their legal representation quite late. And it is because at that point where people are starting really early, they're not fully sure yet what the cost implication is of having a lawyer or even going into that project to start with. So lawyers tend to be brought in pretty late. Another concern that people have is that it's kind of like having a hierarchy of needs. And so you must start thinking, do I need to get my financial advisor first? Do I need to get a contact in government if that's what I'm seeking? Do I need to get a technical partner first? Do I need to get legal advice first? So people now start trying to pull together, particularly the resources that closer to them.
Correct.
Or they are more experienced in. So let us say somebody that has experience with that is in the healthcare sector, for example, and then you want to create some kind of PPP project with the government.
Correct.
The first place that they'll start with is, okay, medical equipment, because that is what they're familiar with. By the time they're bringing in counsel, it's really when they're getting into the nitty-gritty of it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't want to rain on my profession, but people also are always concerned that by the time you bring the lawyers in, that things will start getting complicated too quickly, the negotiations, the back and forth, the consents that were delaying sending out the documents. But we really just have to go through all the tiny details, because our role really is risk management. We are trying to prevent it, and we're trying to ensure that you have a solid contract. So one of the primary issues, particularly that we see happening, is that people bring in the lawyers quite too late. I'll give an example. There was a contract, there is one actually, because it's still ongoing, where we are working with an entity that is in the, let's say, healthcare space. I don't want to go into too many details. And one of the things we realized at the start of the project was that we were actually working with, because when they came to meet us, they told us that it was a concession agreement. And so we asked for all the documentation, they presented it to us, we started working on that. There was a consortium agreement separate with their partners. And midway through the project, you have everything. They're like, yes. They're like, yeah, but some things are still with the government, so. And then midway through, somebody from the government side of things comes out to say that, wait a minute, this is a concession agreement or arrangement. For that to happen, you guys don't have the documentation you thought you have.
Yeah.
We have the PPP law of Lagos State.
Exactly.
We need to go and get some approval from the House of Assembly. And everybody's like, nah, we can't go to the House of Assembly to start doing that. We need to change strategy. But these are questions that we had asked initially, and everybody's like, oh yes, this is it, it's done. We have this document that Lagos State had given us, it would suffice. We've done this 1,001 times. So it is one of those things that if we had been brought in earlier, not relying on the say-so, all that would have been covered. The other thing I think that people also tend to take for granted is finding the right partners. That is very, very key. And in finding the right partners, even if you don't want to get the lawyers at that point to start negotiating documents, you really necessarily need the lawyers to do the due diligence.
Yes, yeah.
it's very, very important. So I think these are some of the things that people take advantage of at that very early stage. And it's understanding, okay, who are the right partners?
Okay.
You don't even have to meet the lawyers. If you're familiar with that space, they can meet people like you to ask, like, oh, you've been in the business for a while. Who do you think I can speak to? Have you heard of this company before? Do you know these people? I'm trying to do this. Who can I work with? So finding those right partners is very essential. Understanding also the environment you're working in is very important. Somebody that has done PPP in Kaduna State is not the same PPP they're going to be in Lagos State.
Exactly.
It's completely different. So understanding and getting like a very solid idea of the lay of the land, the right partners, the right laws, the right documentation would really be helpful for any PPP project at the early stage.
Thank you so much. Nemo. And so another aspect of things that I thought about was the fact that when you have 2 or 3 people come to you to say they want to do a project together, sometimes the project idea is great.
Yeah.
They feel it's profitable, they feel it's bankable, but they themselves sitting together, they don't even have a shareholders agreement. And sometimes they are expecting the lawyer to bring up that topic. Like, okay, are you sure you guys are doing the project together? No, we have known ourselves from primary school. So tell us, in infrastructure project, what are the real importance of having that goal congruent, that bonding, that proper clarity among your partners, the equity partners now?
Okay.
And it's often a very difficult conversation to have.
The truth of the matter is that let us be the bad guy for you. It's a difficult conversation to have, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
In all honesty, it's difficult, but it's necessary. We've had instances where people have started off and everything is fine and dandy. There are no issues at that point. But you need, even if you do not want a shareholders agreement, at the very least have an investors agreement.
Exactly.
And typically speaking, you might say, okay, we don't need one yet because we've not created the SPV. We're still trying to fill out all the specific details. Have a JVA, have an investors agreement, have some form of documentation. When you create your SPV, you can also have those specifics. It is common for people to assume that because we are close or to take over friends. The other issue that people also tend to take for granted is that we're speaking PPP.
Yeah.
When there's governments involved,
I
don't know how else to say it.
Exactly.
To extract money from governments is one of the most difficult things that can ever happen.
Yeah.
And you now tend to realize that depending on how that PPP was created in the first place,
correct,
depending on who instigated it, who brought the parties together for that purpose, is that maybe they are relying on government to, especially if it was a government-led project.
Correct.
Maybe they are relying on government to instigate things. So the minutes that the government is taking their time to move forward, every other person relaxes. This is an excuse for us to take a backseat.
Exactly.
So having specific details in like, okay, what happens in the event that this person is no longer involved? The other important aspect is what happens when there's change in government, because it's bound to happen between 4 years to 8 years. And it doesn't matter if it's the same party that is still in line. So these are some things that people have to take into account. But the importance of having an agreement is that it's almost like a prenup. It helps you, tells you what will happen in the event that something goes wrong. How do we settle the dispute? Do you go to courts? Do you go to arbitration, which may be more private, but maybe more costly? And unfortunately, arbitration used to resolve quite quickly before, and now for some reason the system is regressing. When are people expected to pay? When are the call options going to be called? When are the calls going to be made for the option and for payments to be made? At what points? What are the thresholds? What are the triggers for each payment to be made? What happens when somebody doesn't pay? Do we need to have an escrow included or not? So you do not have to put everything in place, but you need to have some sort of documents to start off with. And trust is important, which is why I said, first of all, that there has to be some due diligence on those that you're working with. Don't take it for granted. But also is that have an escrow if you don't want to put all the money in one person's hands.
And let it trigger upon certain
milestones. There really, thank you, milestones. There really is no point and being serious. multi-PPP projects involves millions of dollars.
Correct.
There's no point in, like, if you can pay the millions to get the project running, you know, what is the small millions to draft a contract?
Exactly. And the other thing about it is that when you advise clients, right, they choose different forms of vehicles, maybe joint ventures or PPPs, or they even look at maybe other forms of formation in itself. And what, based on your own experience, I mean, what sectors are more, or what kind of project do you think a limited liability company may be required or best suited, or even a PLC from start, or even they call it unincorporated joint venture or something like that. So what are the various forms, and what form of recommendation do you provide on those cases? Yeah.
Okay. So it also depends on, I think that's a good question, because the structure tends to throw people off.
Yeah.
It depends really on what you're trying to achieve. The objective will determine the structure.
Okay.
And funny enough, trust would also determine the structure. If we don't trust each other, that would also play a huge role in determining the structure of how we proceed. Most PPPs don't tend to start off with a PLC because you're involving the public.
Yeah.
So it typically will be private entities. Although I believe now that the free trade zone, there was an exposure draft that was issued about 2 weeks ago for reviews by the SEC, where they're now requesting for people to give comments on whether on the exposure draft of when a free trade zone entity can become or can invite the public to participate. So maybe later on we can speak on those things as that law develops. But at this point in time, what tends to happen is that it's typically between private individuals and the government when we're saying PPP. And the structuring tends to happen depending on what you need. So, and also how quickly you want to get it off the ground. As I mentioned, if you're doing a PPP and then it is in Lagos, the key aspect that you'll be thinking about would be, I have to go to National Assembly.
Correct.
So do you want to go through that process? If you don't want to, then what is the alternative? If you are doing something that involves, and maybe again, a government instigated or led project and involves the federal government, then you know that you're most likely going to be speaking with the Bureau of Public Enterprises. Correct. You're going to be speaking with the ICRC
and the likes,
and the likes. So these are very key considerations to make, and it now tallies into how you move forward. It tallies into what documentation is made. Now, for the entity being created, they say, joint venture is unincorporated or incorporated. And if incorporated is typically the special purpose vehicles that we use. And the benefit of that being is that it's kind of like a hedging system. It says, party A and party B, or company A and company B, they want to enter into a project together.
Yeah.
But this new SPV that's been created is now the one that's going to host and house all the risk regarding that. So everybody brings in what it is they're going to be chipping into that project. And as with any financial consideration or creation, is that you now get the percentage of the company based on your investment or your assessed investments. Yeah. So this is a structure that will be taken into consideration when you are, and that's the benefit of it, is that there's a hedge risk. The issue with the unincorporated joint venture arrangements is that there's no central entity. It's that we just know that we're partnering to execute this. At most is that they might have specific terms in it for when they're supposed to meet to discuss or who is supposed to take certain actions, but they do not have a centralized body that is tying them together. Understandably, it would also reduce the cost, but SPVs are not too costly. It is now the structuring of that governance that really matters. But that is also the benefit of it. You now start determining, okay, this party is going to bring in the first chairman of the organization or the first MD. And then after 3 years, after 4 years, this party is now going to take over. So there's that understanding that we're all in this together. All the capital that will be raised, it will be raised through the SPV. All the expenses would be raised through the SPV. So where there is any dispute with a contractor or a third party, okay, the first line is to the SPV, is not to the shareholders in the SPV. And what some people even tend to do is that even in that SPV, it is their own SPV that they'll be using to invest in it, not the original company, to hedge it from the risk, because again, you're working with new partners that you might not be as familiar with.
Yeah.
So if they have any exposure, you don't want it to affect you.
Correct.
Your intellectual property also, you want it to be hedged from whatever the SPV has. So okay, this is a one-off project. The timing also matters. So joint ventures tend to be for a much shorter time,
Correct.
while SPVs, you're thinking 20, 30 years,
yeah.
like much longer periods of times. And then even when working with the government, people tend to think that, the government, you will be entering an agreement with Lagos State government. Happens, but most likely is that you will be working with the SPV of the government. So government agencies also have their own SPVs to execute their contractual agreements and obligations. And for the individual, it is beneficial because imagine you suing government itself,
exactly,
or you suing an SPV owned by government.
Exactly.
I think the last thing I'd also mention on this point is that with this resolution, that all the money of the government is housed by the CBN.
Correct.
So even if for some reason you're able to now access and then to obtain the government for a judgment of the court against the government, when you get to CBN, I will leave you to get us. When you get to CBN, then you'll find out how you're going to execute a garnishee order against the CBN.
Correct.
So these are factors that determine the types of contracts that you enter into, the length of time of the contract, the laws, how quickly you want to get it off the ground, the parties that are involved in the contract, how much risk hedging do you want to do. These are all key factors of that will determine the type of structuring that someone will do for an infrastructure agreement.
Thank you so much. So let's also look at concessions generally. And in concession agreement, there are two parties. There is the public sector, there is the private sector. And I think one of the things we do discuss in our courses is where you have a bilateral negotiation or you have a competitive tendered negotiations. And sometimes the private sector is always ready. They have their financial advisors, they have their lawyers, they are armed and things. But sometimes you find that what the government wants is that you guys go and break ground. Me, I want to commission that project in 2 months' time or in 6 months' time, right? So what would you say to government in terms of how do they get themselves ready, like government's readiness, right? So they do sometimes have councils like yourself, or something like just say the Ministry of Justice just handle it, So what are the things you've seen that you think governments can do better in PPPs, and how can they better prepare to engage in PPPs?
Thank you. I'm going to say this on behalf of the international investors, people coming in. No, but in all seriousness, I think one of the key things that has to happen, documentation is one aspect of it, but the longevity also
takes time.
It takes time. And what I mean by that is that there needs to be some confidence that the government builds to say, when you execute these agreements with them, there are so many PPP cases that are in courts. There are 1,001 of them. There has to be that confidence that government puts to say, okay, we are also operating on the highest system. And I say this as someone who has, as counsel, go on litigation, and now primarily where I work with the transaction and commercial aspects. And we've advised some of these government agencies as well. And in their defense, there's a lot of bureaucracy because that is how the system has been created to mitigate
against any form of
whatever
risk they think is there, because the commissioner doesn't want to say, I'm the one that signed it.
Exactly.
They don't want to sign.
Exactly. So all these things take a lot of time. You don't want to be the person that EFCC comes to drag 3 years after you.
Exactly.
So I do say, as someone that has represented and has acted on behalf of the government side quite often, is that they do try to mitigate this risk. The truth of the matter is that sometimes it just takes forever. There's a project that we've been on, and it's been stalling for quite a number of years because of change in government affects it. So there has to be that confidence put in place. And in drafting the agreement or the concession agreement, is that clauses have to be included inside that gives the private party confidence to say, when we're going through this, the government is willing to do XYZ to ensure that this project is going to be fulfilled. So I think that is one core issue and one core area that has to be addressed. Having the advisors it wouldn't be an issue. I promise you, every time that there is an RFP that's issued by government, there are 1,001 lawyers sending the proposal, printed by email, everything, trying to get in on that deal without a doubt.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that because of how bureaucratic the system is, so many things just take too long to execute. And you're not even sure by the time they're done with it when you're going to get paid for that assignment that you're doing. But in the reality is that for the concession agreement itself, is we have laws. Nigeria is not lacking, and I have to give the government thumbs up for that. Nigeria is not lacking laws, and now almost every state also has their own. What we have as an issue is A, bureaucracy, B, that confidence in, okay, if there's a dispute that arises, this has to be resolved. Confidence in getting the funds, confidence in being sure that by the time there's a change in the system, this is not going to somehow terminate or stall my project. And then it is now just halfway executed, done, and then there's a stall there. So I think these are some of the problems that we tend to have with concession arrangements. But I have to say, honestly speaking, I do see some change with some governments that we worked with. We're working with Lagos State recently on one. And I have seen that drive in New State as well. I have seen that drive to not privatize, but to get the private sector as involved as possible and quickly to resolve some of these issues. So I think that is a huge progress that we're making.
All right, thank you so much for that. So let's go into due diligence. And an area that's often from a number of clients I see is the fact that, Mr. Femi, we went to the bank, they told us to bring our papers. We bought the first set of papers, first round. And after some period of time, they still want more papers and more documentary evidences, bring this agreement, bring that agreement and things. So, but from an early stage, I'm talking to the developer now. How do you think they should get things right from day one? Like, what are the key elements of due diligence you think a developer should expect a serious investor to ask him or her? And start putting the blocks in place such that, because you could do due diligence for over 4 or 5 years, right? But you can build up on them, both from technical, legal, regulatory, financial.
I think anybody that is serious needs to build their track record. That is the very first thing. As much as we say companies or SPVs are separate legal entities, an individual also is a separate legal entity.
That's true.
So anybody that's partnering to create a company together, the very first point is, do you have what it takes? The individuals within it, do they have what it takes to get this done, to build that trust, to build that confidence? Do they have what it takes to get the bank guarantee or a performance bond?
To commit to the share equity.
Do you have the funds to do it?
But people always say, "Don't worry, God will do it." God, it's the Nigerian thing, don't worry, we'll get there. But when they get to the lenders, where is your equity?
And you also have to be able to put skin in the game.
Exactly.
So you can't just depend on, I'm going to get a lender today. What are you bringing into the business? What is it say for, I know XYZ and I'm bringing them together for this SPV. So the individual that is the primary source. Now we talk about, let's say tech, there's a founder-led entity. The person that's behind it. How much do you trust that person? How much is that person trustworthy, known in the system? Can that person get the goodwill to execute? So it starts from there. We also now move into the company itself, and the company has to have this track record.
Correct.
That these are the promoters behind the SPV.
Or even partner with people.
That have done it before. These people have done it before. Let's partner with them to get it done. It is important to look through several layers. So you look at the individuals, you look at the financials. Do they have the capacity? Do they have the capacity to pay? The due diligence could even mean, and if they're not trustworthy, again, as I mentioned, they start asking around. We see it happen all the time. A few weeks back, someone was asking me about that they were looking for an investor for something. And then I knew someone that potentially had been asking me they wanted to invest in that sector. So I called them up. I'm like, this person had mentioned that this is their business kind of aligns with yours. The person says, Nima, hold up first. I'm going to call 3 different companies. Tell me which one of them is. Just say yes or no if it's one of these companies. And so they call the first name, the second name, the third name. So have I called them a company? I say, yes. That is the first one. very unserious people.
Exactly. So the world is very small.
The world is very small. The world is
small.
very unserious people. We had tried that before, and this is it. And this is a situation where it wasn't even due diligence. Okay, you're working, we had done something, we're ready to invest. Now, do you have what it takes? And that reputation has already been built, so that hinders things. And so you look at the governance structure, who are those that are working with them? And that is why when people are creating their board of directors, they bring in the heavy hitters that maybe have been in government, some either as INET or board advice or ad hoc board or something. Yeah. So they bring in these heavy hitters to build that social capital that we can execute. The financials is key. Not having a criminal record, believe it or not, is a key aspect of it. Definitely. But now that we are looking into the future, there's also going to be, we do due diligence. Well, part of the things is that you also look at the ESG factors of it, the sustainability reports. How well have you complied? How well are you going to comply? Do you have all your policies in place? These are key things that we look into. We check into the court cases. We look at the land registry. We look at the Corporate Affairs Commission. Somebody hasn't filed their reports or their filings, their annual reports for a couple of years. So now you don't know if the information that is actually there is accurate or not. So you start asking them, like, provide all your documentation, confirm. And because in all honesty, one can say, oh, you might try to mitigate some of this risk in the agreements that you end up executing with them for indemnities and warranties and representation and all of those things. But by the time it is done, if the chaos has already occurred, you're now ending up in court. So the best thing is, most people, if they see too many red flags for most of these arrangements, if they see too many red flags, they probably wouldn't even end up entering into that contract to start with. Exactly. And you can't even enter into a contract to say we will never be sued. Yeah. There's no way you're not going to get sued. I really don't. No. There's no way somebody can prevent that. So the best thing to do is to get all your ducks in a row. Do your due diligence on yourself as a. Hold on. It's not on it yet. It's not hot. It's not hot. Yeah. So do your due diligence on yourself. In fact, if you're seeking an investor, I'm saying do your due diligence on yourself to see if you are capable of being invested in. But sometimes people tend to deny. They deny, like, okay, but I like the project. I know the governor. I can get it done. I have the network. But deep in their hearts, they know that this is not for me. But so there's that Nigerian spirit of, let's just put our head, get there. Good. But I think we're also all aware that there's a government agency with an eagle on it, and that eagle flies and can fly people to prison. Exactly. So it's very important to be quite wary about this kind of things. I don't want to go into too much details, but it was in the news a couple of years of someone online and with I think with the state government as well, like, oh, we gave you XYZ to execute, you didn't execute, and then you now bring it to the court of public opinion. Honestly, we can't help you in this instance. We can't help you in this instance. So really speaking is that you do the due diligence on yourself. You have your in-house counsel, you have your in-house financial officers, you have all of those people, auditors, you have all those people check everything. Do you have the IP? Do you have the right partners? Do you have the capacity to execute? Do you have your ESG? Have there been any sanctions against you? The tax man is a huge aspect of this. Are you owing the tax man anything? Because one day they would come to collect. How is that going to affect the business? So it's really important that try to do it for yourself before you even start seeking external investors to start with, because that is going to play a huge role. And it would be quite unfortunate that you fail to do that. And you, as you said, took head inside. Exactly. And if you're fortunate, you get it up and running. And then for some reason, that issue now arises. You have now tainted the reputation that you were just trying to build in the first place. Tomorrow, the small network of people, that one is the failed project from which day was it? So I think it's very important to do it. I've mentioned quite a range of themes to do the due diligence on, but the starting point always would be that you have to look in yourself. So one of the things I also notice also is the fact that most infrastructure projects, and this are built on land, right? And from a legal perspective, in terms of security and mortgage and the likes, the land plays an important role in
the security arrangements of the project in itself. So in terms of land acquisition, right? Sometimes government could cede the land. Say they give you the land in return for equity in the project. And sometimes you could go buy the land from the community. But when you now get to maybe your final stage of due diligence or about to achieve financial close, the lender says this land, this title is not, because we are putting this $200 million on this land because he who owns the land owns the property. So what would you be your own general advice in terms of for project developers in securing the land or acquiring land for their projects? How should they do it in a very tight way?
Okay. I want to start off by saying that there's a third option, actually, leasing the land.
Okay, that's true. But you don't want to lease the land. You want to own the land.
No. So if it's a PPP project, and the government owns the land and then would lease it. And it returns back after some time. So they lease it to the SPV.
I agree.
But I have been in practice for over a decade now, like many years, and longer, but many years.
Exactly.
And there's a case that I started working on that started before I was born.
Oh, wow.
And it is still on.
Now?
Yes. So
on a land matter?
Yes.
For a project?
For a project, on a land matter. So just to give you context that you don't want any disputes. And that's why I mentioned the third option is that let them lease it to, you have to have that documentation set. That, okay, maybe the government has given the land to the SPV that it's using.
Yeah.
There's that documentation. You won't ask them, please make sure it's registered at the land registry.
Correct.
And then let's that government agency now lease it to the SPV.
Correct.
So there's now that relationship there that, okay, this is a lease. We're going to be paying you every month, whatever it is, it goes on. Even if somebody comes next year I'm like, okay, there's already a building on it, they're paying, we're getting money from it, it's in our benefits to keep this going. But due diligence with land is very tricky, I have to say, because there's a lot of forgery that happens, a lot of forgery of documentation. There's a lot of complexity with the way our land laws are, in the sense that, there's the 99-year tenure.
Correct, yeah.
So now 99 years, all of us are looking at is in a couple of decades time.
Exactly.
So that 99 years, it comes to an end, I think in 1970 something, 20 something or so. It's quite, or 6 something. It's quite close actually. And so it is a huge factor with land matters, especially like what is going to happen if the grants, the lease, the title, if it is not renewed by the government, what is going to happen? So that is a huge concern that people have. But it also speaks to the root of it. The land belongs to the government. Everybody is subleasing it. The land belongs to the government. So the starting point for any due diligence is the government, the person that is the original owner of the land. You go and then check all the documentation. But what we see now is that because of the cost of registration of subleases or the deeds, people tend not to register it. And so you're now not necessarily sure of what you are seeing at the government, at the land registry. The same thing with, okay, if there is a mortgage on that property, if somebody has mortgaged that land, if that land has been put forward as security, typically speaking, it is supposed to have been registered at the Corporate Affairs Commission. We notice that people don't do that. And this is the benefit instead of the oil and gas sector. You must go and register at the NUPRC or NMDPRA. So when you're doing your due diligence, you just go straight there. You know that whatever information you're seeing is accurate. But because that is more highly regulated. But fortunately or not, the Corporate Affairs Commission just has too many companies to deal with. So after a while, when people are not filing or doing any of those things, the most that happens is that they will just strike up their name from the record. But we do not know. You can't fully trust all the information you see at the CAC. So that is why instead what happens is that there be indemnities or warranties included into the agreement. But as I started off, where there's a case that has been going on for how many years, by the time you enter into the dispute, if at that point it's really just negotiation if there's no proper title to it. So that due diligence on the land, on ownership, is very, very important to start with. And that very starting point is very essential. Having the documentation to mitigate where there's any failure is also important. But the truth of the matter is that you can't be certain. That is why you have to work with trustworthy people.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, again, with the system, and maybe might be the benefit of working with the PPP and the governments, is that another government comes in, and we saw what happened with
the mall.
Yeah, with the mall. Thank you.
Yeah, the one at Falamo.
No, not even the mall at Falamo. What are we doing for? Landmark.
Okay.
They come and like clear everything, and like by hand title to it and all of these things. So these things are legitimate risks. And then that is why the other benefit or the other thing that might help to an extent will be insurance.
Correct.
To an extent. But that due diligence is really the starting point.
So let me just ask another part here, is that when let's say you acquire land from a community.
Yeah.
Or government acquires a community land. And this is what I've seen in parts whereby government are meant to make a set of settlements to the community. They did a part settlement. They said they will pay them later. Now you are the private sector, you're building a refinery on that land. And they're likely that government, they are still owing us money. So sometimes do you feel like, okay, for the sake of peace, maybe I should just provide the settlements, and maybe get refunded back by government, which I may not get back. What do you think about those kind of things?
So it's he who wears the shoe, is the one that knows where it's paying.
Yeah.
There are certain transactions, land transactions that have who's supposed to go and register the deed, or who's supposed to go and register the transaction. So let us say for where somebody, there's a security or so, the person that's supposed to go and register it typically might not be. It is the person that is affected that will go and register it. So okay, you're giving us a security, your land, for example, or whatever else it is. This is an example. But because I am the one that is receiving that security, if I do not register that security, it would not be my benefits tomorrow if more secure creditors come to you or to claim against your debt. So it is in the same way that sometimes what typically would happen is, why are you waiting for the government? You know that it is possible. I don't want to blame the government. You know it is possible that the government might not be able to execute on what it is supposed to. So people would take on that responsibility instead to ensure that the community is well serviced. And it happens a lot that a lot of the bigger entities, multinational or even domestic within the country, they have specialized government relations or community relations officers that ensure that all these things are settled. Because there's no point in you building on that project when you have the direct stakeholders in contention with whatever you're doing. That project cannot succeed. So it is say, okay, government, I know that you mentioned you were going to sort these people out. Let us take part of this thing on. You can even use as part of the negotiation. You're supposed to pay the community 100 million, whatever it is. Let us take on that responsibility, reduce it from our equity obligation or something. Let us settle it to make sure that we have a perfect relationship with the community, because that project would not be able to succeed unless you're able to. So I was speaking to someone, I think a few months back, drilling. And they're like, they buy lunch for everybody in the community every day.
Can you imagine? Wow. They
buy lunch for the people in the community.
Wow.
And that is a core aspect of community management. So you can't go and say, government, you gave us everything, give us these people. You can't chase them away.
That's true.
You find a way to negotiate to bring it to a close.
Okay, so let's go into other major risks. People talk about force majeure happening, especially when a lot of people in that were doing COVID, right? When nobody could move anywhere, it started becoming a very difficult thing, right? So what typically do you advise, and how do you ensure that force majeure provisions are within these kind of agreements that are PPP related or concession?
Yeah. You can only make it as solid or watertight as possible. I have to say, you can be as expansive as possible of what happens, how soon when the force majeure occurs, the person that is directly affected, how quickly do they have to disclose to their party that I'm unable to fulfill my duties because of XYZ? And what happens then? How long do you give them to resolve that situation?
Yeah.
Are you solely going to be relying on their explanation for force? Because somebody might say that I wasn't able to get Forex for XYZ reason, and maybe the government changed laws, and so on that basis, I'm not able to fulfill my obligation. Okay, what is the alternative? Are we going to just stop there? So it is a thing of you'd have to put in very specific terms of what happens when someone has claimed that force majeure has arisen. What happens when someone has claimed it? How do you react to it next? Is there an alternative? Is this going to form part of what amounts to a dispute that you negotiate between parties? How soon are you going to put into place that, okay, it has arisen, we're going to give you 6 months to 3 years to 1 year for this to resolve before you move forward? But the issue really is that because it is construction, it is projects that we're dealing with, there's a lot of variation that might now affect pricing.
Correct.
So you have to now say, okay, we have to resolve this within a certain period of time.
Exactly, yeah.
Because by the time, if we're giving it 6 months, 1 year,
it's going to affect
the bottom, other parts of the project, other calculations, other parts of the budget. And so there has to be specific timelines given to resolving that as quickly as possible. But parties also have to have a clear idea of what will amount to force majeure, so that one party doesn't take it as an excuse to take a step back from their obligations or to avoid taking responsibility for it. So I think that is one key thing that people tend to they just put these XYZ flood, this, that, illness, all these things with amounts of force majeure. Okay, now you've mentioned it to me. What next?
Exactly.
So it's important, okay, you have 3 days to communicate it. You must communicate immediately, become aware of it. Parties would ensure that you use their best efforts within XYZ months to resolve the issue. If it fails to resolve, then that's when I start taking drastic measures. So I think those are some key aspects that in risk management for using, like, at least with force majeure, and with any risk, if that risk arises, how are you going to resolve it?
Correct.
How quickly do you plan on resolving it? Again, as I've mentioned, the pricing is going to be affected.
Correct. Yeah. Now, that's a very good one. Thank you very much for that. And one major area I also see a number of entrepreneurs or people developing large-scale projects at an early stage is that they tend to think that they can defer the legal work to later, maybe because they feel it's too expensive. I mean, we're still negotiating at this point, right? So, and as you started this podcast, you had mentioned that it's really good to bring your legal team in right from the very first go in itself. And what are the risks of bringing it in later? I mean, some obvious risks could be, you know what, you've already negotiated, you can't go back again and start renegotiating, right? And but in terms of financing now, which is one of the major areas that people tend to see as the key deliverable for a project. At what stage, when you're trying to speak to an investor, at what stage do you think your legal counsel should really come in? Is it at early? When exactly do you think it should happen?
I think it should. I get the fear.
Yeah,
I understand the money.
Well, it's the money, exactly.
But let's just put it into perspective. You say, okay, you bring in your counsel early on to draft an agreement and negotiate with you. I'm just giving ballpark rough figures. This is not indicative of what.
You don't mention any figure. No.
Okay. It's not indicative. I'm just saying, okay, let me do something ridiculous. Let's just say, for the contract drafting, you would have paid the lawyer 100,000, not in any way reflective.
Yeah.
Okay, you fail to do that, and then a suit arises. The litigation you're going to pay for would be, let's say, 5-10 million. It would be
more.
No, definitely. It would be more. It would be multiples. That's my point. That whatever costs you're trying to save from the drafting, you most likely will pay for it if a suit arises in litigation. So you ask yourself, am I willing to take the risk? And maybe it's how much of a gambler are you? How much of a risk taker are you really? That determines when you bring in your lawyer. Are you very, excited about the prospect of the suits? Then maybe you can bring your lawyer later on. But nothing stops you. And it's something to say, okay, have a lawyer retainer, even if it's for other things that you're working on. Or at least have a lawyer that you speak to. And you can get the person's early. I don't think, maybe when it gets more complex, the lawyer might ask for fees, but get someone's perspective to say, I'm working on this thing. What do you think I should do?
Correct.
I'm working on this agreement. You can even do it per agreement. Like this agreement I'm working on, what do you think I should do about it? I'm at this point in time of it. And then as it progresses, and because I understand the other concern is that they don't want to commit so early because meet me, I don't say I'm greedy.
The project may not happen.
Exactly. The project may not happen. And the lawyers will be like, I've already drafted your your consortium agreement, your concession agreement. I've drafted all of this. I want my money today.
Exactly.
And then the other person is like, oh, but the transaction and then end up not going through.
I've been in those shoes so many times.
Yeah. So it is one of those issues. And sometimes I know for smaller scale items, people say, okay, we pay you per assignments or other arrangements are made, but it is important to at least get some perspective of a lawyer. And I want to also qualify not to disparage any of my colleagues, but get a good lawyer, someone that is relatively familiar or at least is willing to learn about that subject area, that can learn to understand the subject matter, to really advise you on what to do in that instance. So it's important to have someone that is willing to hold your hand through it and has your best interest at heart while executing your projects.
All right then. Now, before we close, because we're getting to the end of the podcast now in itself, is the fact that Nigeria today is so much concerned about infrastructure, and we need to beat that infrastructure gap, both on roads, on rail, power, and the likes. What do you think government can do better? I mean, beyond the issue of capital. I know that capital is such much of a big deal, but are there any thoughts you have in terms of how Africa's or Nigeria's infrastructure gap can be met in a creative way, or in a way whereby, government is not thinking about now?
Okay. Very good question, I have to say. I have thoughts on it. Maybe some I can't say. But I have thoughts on it.
Okay.
I would mention that one of the key issues we tend to have as a country is that we have low trust level. The social trusts, the social contracts between everybody is quite low. And that is what affects people's perception of government. That's what affects people's perception of how quickly we're moving. We look at other countries, everybody will always start, Singapore, yes, a smaller system, but they were able to move so quickly. What is holding us back? Things like that. But truly speaking is that our social contract is so broken. This is a government thing, but on a larger scale is that, again, these infrastructure projects, there are several parties that are party to it.
Yeah.
For the social construct to work, to execute, to be fulfilled, is that every single person that is involved in this thing, they execute to the best of their capacity.
Yeah.
We are not lacking laws, so the government doesn't need to execute. Maybe there are some laws that need to be executed
or redrafted,
particularly the Land Use Act. That is the whole other session, like the Land Use Act that people can extensively. So the government needs to look into that. True. Bureaucracy. True. The Business Miscellaneous Provisions Act that came about for ease of doing business. It mentioned there that every government agency is supposed to have all the listing requirements, pricing, costs listed on its website.
Yeah.
Some of our agencies are yet to comply with that. So there are little things that can be done. And in all honesty, these are little things that can be done that would reap very high results. True. Capital, we already said it, there's no need for us to go into that again. But in all seriousness, and this is this is more a personal thing, that in all seriousness, you don't have to look at each other that.
Yeah.
If they give you that contract today, what are you going to do about it? We see in Lagos, we saw what happened with the airports.
Yeah.
I think it was Lagos, so like, the runway was too small. I've never heard of that kind of thing.
Yeah, the apron was too small.
It was
to park place. I went to build it.
Exactly.
Someone
somebody somewhere has broken, and the government will say, we executed a contract, we did this, we hired, during the process, there was a bidding process, this person came out on top based on all, we've taken all the necessary steps to ensure that this contract went out. And even within the company that ended up doing this, so we did everything we were supposed to. It was one silly architect there that forgot they were supposed to do that, and they ended us up in this situation. So that's why I say that it costed us a lot of money. So that's why I mentioned that there's a lot government can do, but the primary thing government can do, and the primary thing everybody that's involved in an infrastructure project or any project for that, is that how do I contribute to this system to the best of, not to the best, to above my capacity. Why am I somebody else's capacity that's behind
exactly.
and adopt it? And then I think that is a way that we definitely will see progress, because we know there are so many government projects that are ongoing.
Correct.
That have been given through PPP, through concessions, JVs, incorporated SPVs. There's so many government projects that are going.
I think that's it's a fundamental fact you just mentioned, because I was thinking of some other things like, them building their capacity to, being open to learn. Sometimes you may find somebody doing like a waste to energy project, and nobody has done a waste to energy project in Nigeria before, but government wants to do this thing, private sector is coming in, but we should all try and have an open mind to learn from each other. Another last pose I would really want to pose also is that it's power. And there's this thing about the fact that Nigeria's energy transition is in the renewables, and we need to do climate change and things. And I've seen in so many forums in AFC talking about the fact that just transition and Nigeria needs to have uses gas in itself. I mean, some school of thought believe that, the gas is creating gas flare, and gas flare is polluting the ozone layer. And some people believe that, okay, you know what, we still use the gas, but maybe we should use part of the renewables. And we've not had our own industrial revolution. The likes of Germany, England, they all built their industries on steam, on coal, and a few other things. So this whole, energy transition thing, where does, NIMO stand? This is not, this is not your firm. This is you.
No. Exactly. I get your point. I think, sorry, just to add to the point you mentioned about capacity. Valid point, but I don't want to mention that again because of the social contract issues. We have seen situations where government sends people abroad and then leaves them stranded. That is part of their own way of damaging the social contract.
Exactly.
And we're talking about building capacity. In all honesty, again, that's why I don't want to make a government thing, because there are government institutions that I've worked with that they do trainings. They are they travel for workshops and things. They try to develop the youth and all of those things. But our education problem is on a larger scale. It starts from the primary school. Let us look at it instead. And as I mentioned sometime during the session that infrastructure projects, they're quite costly. It's very capital intensive. We have billionaires everywhere. Those are the people, the millionaires, billionaires, the DFIs, these are people investing in these things. They can take on the aspect of capacity training and all of it in everybody's doing. Why would you want to enter the project if no one's we're supposed to do elsewhere?
Exactly.
No expect government to do it. So I think on that point.
All right then.
On the energy transition, my personal view of it is that, again, going to the issue of learning and capital, is that Nigeria is not ready to leapfrog. People want us to, but it's unreasonable to expect that. It's also more expensive to do that. And we are not a people capable, that's wrong. We're not a people ready to be capable of making that leapfrog to the next stage. Why would I see it all the time online, and maybe I don't go out enough to see it around this thing. But you see so many places, like on the news everywhere, of very tiny innovations being made. And you ask yourself, when last was a Nigerian innovation a global phenomenon? I just want to ask you that now. Can you think of one?
I can't, maybe books. Maybe, I don't know. Like innovation. Can you think of one? I don't know.
You think of the tiny things. I don't think so.
like engineering innovation, like cars, like phones.
Even just a part of it that is like this was a Nigerian innovation.
Yeah, there could be, but I don't think I've
exactly. So
that is shipped globally. That is globally recognized. Used.
Let us now bring it home. Let us not even say globally recognized use. Let us say locally recognized use. Yeah. Kindly think of one. Yeah. Exactly. Is that we as a people, we do not innovate as much as we should, or maybe we do not promote the innovation as much as we should.
Yeah.
There are tiny levels on which we do this. Maybe Lagos hairline with
exactly.
or with our clothing or with entertainment. There are in some ways that we innovate.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to technology, we do not innovate as much as we should, especially when it comes to like physical technology. And that's what is needed to leapfrog. If you've not done small, why do big or expect to do
exactly.
big? It's going to take a while for that to happen. Realistically speaking, it would be much cheaper for us to get the ones that Germany or whoever is discarding to use it.
And in
my honest opinion, save for all the global commitments, I believe, yes, we should work towards it. It should be a bigger issue that everybody looks at. But in all seriousness, on the hierarchy of needs, we're not there yet.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
If Germany, US, UK were all the countries, if they were able to succeed based on those ones, okay, give it to us. Let us succeed, and we'll come and meet you.
Exactly.
So we don't need to. If you succeeded based on it, why is it all of a sudden when it's our turn to use it is now bad? No.
Yeah.
Let us also succeed. Or if you want us to join in that process, subsidize it for us.
Exactly.
But a lot of the energy transition, innovation and technology, they are quite expensive.
And you have to import them regardless.
They're quite expensive. You have to import them. Yes, there are quite a number of institutions that give out funding for this.
Correct.
But it is nowhere near what is required for us as a country of over 200 million people to grow or to develop. So my honest opinion is that I think leapfrogging is a wishful thinking.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen. This is my I don't think it's going to happen. I would always speak for the increase and the continuous consideration of sustainability reporting. The FRCN now has a sustainability framework. There's a roadmap that's been executed and it will become mandatory, I think, in about a year or two. So I completely agree. There are steps that can be taken, but realistically speaking, we do not have the track record to show that we're going to do that.
Thank you so much, Nemo.
Sorry, can I end on a more positive note?
Okay, yes, you cut it out. Okay.
No, you don't have to, but I'm just saying that on a more positive. I think.
Okay. Let me ask another question.
No problem.
So finally, in this podcast, we've spoken about getting projects from ground up in itself, and what are your final passing thoughts?
My final passing thoughts are that Nigeria has a lot of potential.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of projects being executed as we speak.
Correct. Yeah.
I think that people should be more conscious. Companies, individuals should be more conscious about how they contribute to the execution of these projects, how they relate with external investors.
Yeah.
And one of the ways of doing that is relying on good advisors, good counsel, having good partners. That is one way to ensure that these projects that we're developing is not just for the near now, it's not just to tick a box, is that these are institutions, these are large-scale projects that are going to benefit the country down the line. So I honestly think that we're at a good stage. And I have to also thank you a lot that having this kind of platform with the learning and teaching and promoting all of this is, when we're saying government, why would government train? You're here. Why would government train someone as an entrepreneurship coach come to Africa candidates? So that's what I mean, that training, everybody can take their own step in being the best version when they are part of the project. And if we all continue to, in our small ways, build and strengthen Nigeria's social contract between everybody, in the long run, we would have projects that we are proud of. And we will be able to finally leapfrog.
Thanks. Very good. Thank you so much, Nemo.
Thank
you. We've come to the end of this episode of Making Infrastructure Happen. I've been speaking with Nemo, and she's a partner at Kenna. And we've spoken a lot about various forms of things you can do from the ground up to get your project structured. Until the next episode, please stay tuned, and we'll be back to you again. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.